Hello, thank you so very much for dropping by this video. This channel is dedicated to the teachings of Christ without religion. So this is all about how to have an awesome, abundant life based on the teachings of Christ. So one of the very intriguing things that it's written that Christ taught, it was an instruction to pray for our enemies, to pray for those who harm us. And I'm really excited to share why this is so important. I'll share some examples from my own life and how this is a life-changing practice, especially when you know the principles behind it. So, first and foremost, this idea is based in the idea of inherent goodness, inherent divinity, even, that was predominant the first couple hundred years after Christ was here. This idea that we are children of God. Sadly, that got replaced with the idea that we're miserable sinners. But originally, the good news, the message that Christ taught was that, as it says in the good book, we're made in the image and likeness of the divine. So, what this means and why, so what's the connection with that and praying for those who harm us? Well, what that means is if I am doing something that's harmful or someone else is doing something that's harmful, they've lost contact with that original goodness, with that inherent divinity. And hence, you could say, in essence, they're spiritually sick. They're not really themselves anymore, which is oftentimes what people say after they do something harmful. They say, "What was I thinking?" Or, "That wasn't me. What happened?" So, the idea is if someone's behaving unwell, they're spiritually sick. They're unwell and they actually need help. Now, the other idea connected to this practice is that resentment. When one person treats another person badly, the person who's treated badly tends to feel resentful or angry, and oftentimes this doesn't just last for a moment. It'd be one thing if, someone did something harmful and you're like, and then you were done. But usually resentment lingers. And it burns away everything good. And if left unchecked, resentment can very quickly escalate into like intense irritation and then to anger and rage. So these things destroy life. We've all experienced it. We've all experienced someone says, let's say someone says something rude or really mean, and then we're thinking about it, feeling upset for hours, days, maybe weeks. Someone treats us really unwell, and that hurt, and not just the hurt, but the anger, that burning feeling can last for months, days, weeks, months, sometimes years. It eats us alive. Resentment eats us alive. So that's the logic behind why it's so important to pray for those who harm you, is that they're spiritually sick. And if we get into resentment, we become spiritually sick. And so that's why forgiveness is so important. It helps us let go of the past, because otherwise we're dragging the past along with us. And when we do that, it literally just eats away at us. So a very vivid example of this happened to me recently. Let me think. I need to change a few details so that I don't reveal who the person was. Okay. So someone just treated me so rudely, dismissively. They were drunk to boot. They didn't, I said something and then they heard something completely different, and then they got angry about that. And then I went to talk to them, and I didn't really feel like I did anything wrong. I felt like I could have been a little bit more diplomatic or considerate. But I went to talk to them and I'm like, hey, if you have a few minutes, I'd like to apologize. Like I really went, I had to swallow my pride a little bit to do that. And then they were rude. They were even ruder when I went to apologize, when I hadn't really done anything wrong. So, before this practice, that would have eaten me up. And there's some other details which I won't get into that just make it even more complicated. And so I really practiced this, praying for them, really taking to heart, okay, they behave poorly. They're spiritually sick. Really taking to heart, okay, if I'm caught up in resentment and anger, I'm spiritually sick. And then I really bit the bullet and I looked at what my part in the situation was. I completely disregarded everything wrong that they had done. I was like, okay, what was my part? What could I have done better? How did I? And lo and behold, there were definitely things I had done and not done that contributed to this situation. It took a day or two. I just on and off throughout the day, I would have to remind myself of these insights because the anger kept coming back and the resentment kept coming back. And I was literally within 2 days, within about half a day, most of it was gone. And then it kind of came back and I would pray for them and I would sit with the realizations and be like, oh yeah, I messed up too. Because it's so easy to point the finger, right? It's not always so easy to find our part in a situation. And yeah, so I hope this video inspires you to reflect on our inherent divinity, our inherent goodness, and inherent goodness of everyone. And the recognition that if someone's unwell, it's because they're spiritually sick. They're disconnected from that goodness. I'm going to share a little prayer from the 12-step tradition of how to deal with anger. And it's just a really simple prayer. Please, God, so it starts off with the recognition, this person's spiritually sick. Please, God, higher power. You get to name that higher power. And if you're an agnostic or an atheist, higher mind, higher heart. Please, higher power, help me to have the same tolerance, compassion, and patience I would cheerfully grant a sick friend, because this is someone who has spiritual sickness. Please spare me from being resentful. How can I be helpful to them? Thy will, not mine, be done. What this requires is being more attached to the truth and more attached to peace than to resentment and anger. And it's not always easy. This doesn't mean ignoring, or completely forgetting what happened. And responding when a response is necessary. But it does entail letting go of the poison. Resentment is a poison. There's a great saying, resentment is the poison that I drink trying to harm you. Thank you so much for joining in. Take care. Big love.